In this week's Parsha, same week as Purim, we read the very sad story of the Egel. The Jews made a golden calf. But there are some very interesting aspects or details here. The Torah says Moshe was on the mountain, and he was told to go down off the mountain. Go down. And Rashi says God was telling him that you have just descended from your high level of the leader of the Jewish people, because the Jewish people are not on the high level that they used to be. So the level of the leader is dependent on the level of the people. The greatness of the leader comes from the greatness of the people. The more precious the people are, the more precious the leader of the people is. So Moshe is told, go down. The people have sinned, they have made a graven image. Then the Torah says, Moshe had received the tablets written by God, and he came down off the mountain. And he came down off the mountain, and his face was shining. And the people were so intimidated, they were so awed by that shining light that they were afraid to approach him or even look at him. So Moshe had to wear a mask to protect the people from the brightness that they couldn't handle. So the first thing we notice is Moshe comes down off the mountain, and then it repeats. He came down off the mountain with the tablets of the Ten Commandments that God wrote on, and his face was shining. And he didn't know that his face was shining. What's the connection here? And why does it repeat twice that Moshe came down off the mountain? So there are many commentaries about it, but here's some very interesting thing. Moshe was on the mountain, and he was told that the Jews had made a golden calf or a graven image, and that he should descend off the mountain. So he did. But then the Torah says he descended off the mountain with the tablets in his arms. And he didn't know that his face was shining. The repetition that he came down off the mountain seems to be saying he was told to descend, which he did, but he came down off the mountain with the tablets in his hands. He wasn't told to take the tablets. In fact, it would have been a great idea, now that the Jews had made a golden calf, that he shouldn't bring the Ten Commandments to them. He shouldn't bring them off the mountain. But he did. And the Torah seems to be emphasizing that. He didn't come down without the tablets, he came down with the tablets. And the Medrash comments on that and says, when he heard from God that the Jews had made a golden calf or a graven image, he simply did not believe it. And so he brought the tablets down off the mountain, which was not easy. They were very heavy. But when he saw what was going on, he threw them down and broke them, for which God thanked him for not delivering the contract to the people so that they are not as guilty as they would be if they had received the document, so to speak. Moshe does the people a favor and protects them from their own self-destructive behavior. But then, what is the connection with his face shining? Here we're talking about the second set of tablets, not the ones that he broke. The second set of tablets, when he came down off the mountain, his face was shining. Why not the first? So Rashi makes a fascinating observation. Rashi says, look at the power that a sin has. When Moshe came down off the mountain with the first set of tablets, which he broke, the Jews were not afraid of seeing God himself. God had shown himself at Mount Sinai, spoke to them face to face, and they were not intimidated. But now that they had sinned with the golden calf, now when Moshe comes down from the mountain and his face is shining, they can't look. They're frightened, even by the more limited brightness of Moshe's holiness. So the first time around, before they sinned, it sounds like they were able to handle the holiness because they were holy. But now that they sinned, they had become spiritually weakened, and they couldn't even tolerate the light that shone from Moshe's face. What a power sins have. There are two hesitations about that. Number one, at that point the Jews had already repented. They had done tshuva. The second tablets were given after God forgave them for the sin. So why would they be so damaged by the sin after they had already done tshuva? Also, isn't it a little bit strange to say the power of a sin? It should say the devastation, the damage. Power sounds very positive. Why would the sages use that expression? Power of a sin? So as with everything, let's see if we can find the positive interpretation. Maybe it's the opposite. Before they sinned, they heard God speaking face to face with them, and they were not frightened by the holiness. They didn't get it. Not that they were holy enough to tolerate it, but that they just didn't get it. They didn't appreciate what was in front of their eyes. But the power of a sin sensitizes the person, of course, after he does tshuva. But it sensitizes the person to where the appreciation, the understanding, the insight, which allows them to see holiness for what it is. Now they couldn't look at it. Now they realized holiness is something to humble you. And it did. And so they had to look away. The question is only, is that the power of a sin or is that the power of tshuva? What gave them that sensitivity? The sin or the regret and the tshuva over the sin? Well, tshuva obviously puts you in a very high awareness level. But part of that is because tshuva comes after a sin. And were it not for the sin, the tshuva wouldn't have that effect. So yes, it is the power of a sin. Because ultimately, sins do exist for a reason. Not just to give us an opportunity to mess up, must exist for a positive reason. When a person sins and does tshuva, the power of godliness that exists in the sin, buried deeply within the sin, is actually released, and the sin becomes a catalyst for godliness. Yes, the sin itself, not the act of the sin. That's got to stop. But the effect of the sin is that some aspect of the godly soul is so shaken by that momentary separation from God that the increased devotion, the increased passion, the increased commitment comes from the sin more than from the tshuva. It's just that without the tshuva, that increase in passion and so on wouldn't have an outlet. If he's not coming back to the observance of mitzvahs, what is he going to do with that additional inspiration, sensitivity, passion, commitment? So the tshuva actually gives the sin's impact a way of expressing itself. The way back. But the way back is motivated by the desire to come back, and that comes from the sin. So we've learned something incredibly meaningful. Moshe comes down off the mountain with the tablets the first time around because he didn't believe that the Jews actually did this. That faith was not wasted or lost. After he broke the tablets, which was the right thing to do, his trust and his belief in his fellow Jews did not weaken. And so he goes back up the mountain for another 40 days and 40 nights to get God's forgiveness. I don't know why it took 40 days and 40 nights. I mean, either you're forgiving or you're not forgiving. So for 39 days, God did not forgive, only on the 40th day? Or is it layers of forgiveness? Layers of relationship bonds, threads that tie two people together. Each thread had to be repaired so that it's a thorough repair. So it could be that forgiveness happened on the first day. God said, I forgive them, I will not punish them, and I'm no longer angry at them. That doesn't mean that the relationship is as healthy as it was, and certainly not any healthier. That took 40 days. So the second time around, Moshe comes down with the tablets. This time there is no thunder, there is no lightning, there is no shofar, there is no smoke, no drama whatsoever. It's quiet. It's unassuming. It's humble. We blew it the first time, we're just trying to make up. These, the sages say, these second tablets, they lasted forever. The first were somewhat compromised by the exposure, by the publicity of it, the dissipation. When you expose something, some part of it dissipates into the air, into space. So, Moshe's belief in the Jewish people did not wane. He defended them fully, received a full pardon for them. And then God says, put together some tablets, some stone, and I will write the commandments on them again. The forgiveness is complete. But in some way, the relationship is better. So he didn't know that his face was shining. Moshe just felt he was doing his job. Did he do anything special that his face should be shining? Is he holier now than he was before? He didn't think so. He's just a hard-working guy trying to keep God and his people in a good mood and a good relationship with each other. But the people saw and they couldn't tolerate it because they are now so insightful and so appreciative and so aware and sensitive to God's holiness that even the little limited amount of godliness shining from Moshe's face was too awesome for them to look at. Not the eye couldn't handle it. Their humility couldn't handle it. Who are we to look at godliness? So it was an improvement, not a desensitization. So yes, even that statement of the sages can be spun in a positive fashion. The power of a sin. So we can now say, if that's how powerful one sin is, how powerful are we? You see, you got to separate the person and the sin, right? So when you say it's the power of the sin, not the power of the person who sins, if you're saying it's damage, so the damage comes from the sin, not from the sinner, you would think it's the sinner that's causing the damage. Like if I break your windows, you wouldn't say, wow, the power of broken windows makes you regret. No, you would say the fact that you broke my window makes you regret. But the sages are saying that there's a power to the sin. So if one sin has that kind of power, how about all the sins we are guilty of? How sensitized are we in this long, dark, endlessly painful gullus? So when we do tshuva, in other words, when Mashiach comes, we will have a greater, deeper, more profound appreciation for godliness than even that generation who were too humble to look at Moshe's holiness. So we have something really good to look forward to. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program, there's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below, and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.